invisible time and the eternal mind of God. Part 1. The metaphysical framework, God, time, and knowledge. Section 1. The nature of divine eternity. The relationship between God and time stands as a central and formidable issue in the philosophy of religion and systematic theology. Determination of God's temporal status, whether he exists within time, outside of it, or in some complex hybrid state, profoundly shapes the understanding of the divine nature and its core attributes, including omniscience, omnipotence, and immutability. Point 1. This single metaphysical question sends ripples through doctrines of creation, divine action, and providence, ultimately framing how one comprehends the very possibility of a relationship between the Creator and a temporal creation. Point 2. The term eternity itself can be used neutrally to denote whatever God's relationship to time is, but historically it has been the subject of two rival and powerful traditions: divine timelessness, atemporality, and divine temporality, sempiterity. Point 3. While classical theism, for much of its history, reached a near consensus on God's timelessness, the contemporary philosophical landscape has seen a significant shift, with many, if not most, modern philosophers of religion now advocating for some form of divine temporality. Point 4. This evolution in thought is not merely a technical adjustment but reflects a deeper shift in the underlying intuitions about what constitutes a perfect and personal being, moving from classical ideals of static perfection to modern valuations of dynamic relationality. To understand the theory concerning an unmanageable time in the mind of God, one must first navigate the contours of this foundational debate. The classical atemporal views divine timelessness. The traditional and historically dominant view within Western theism posits that God is timeless. This position, known as atemporality, asserts that God exists entirely outside of time. He is not located at any point in the temporal sequence and therefore does not experience temporal succession, the flow of moments from past, through present, to future. Point 4. This conception of divine eternity was heavily influenced by the categories of Greek philosophy, particularly the Platonic distinction between the transient, changing world of appearances and the perfect, unchanging realm of eternal forms. Point 1. Early and medieval Christian theologians, most notably Saint Augustine of Hippo, Boethius, and Saint Thomas Aquinas, systematically developed this idea, integrating it into the core of Christian doctrine. Point 1. The cornerstone of this model is the celebrated definition formulated by the 6th century philosopher Boethius. Eternity is the whole, simultaneous and perfect possession of boundless life. Point 4. This definition is profoundly significant for several reasons. First, it establishes a qualitative rather than merely quantitative distinction between God's existence and that of created beings. Point 8. God is not simply older or longer lasting than the his mode of existence is fundamentally different. Temporal beings possess their lives moment by moment, with the past irretrievably lost and the future not yet gained. Point 9. In contrast, a timeless God possesses his entire, unending life all at once. Second, Gropius's use of the word simultaneous points to the central concept of the eternal now. From the divine vantage point, all of history, every moment from the cosmic beginning to its end, is present in a single, unchanging, and all-encompassing instant. Point 1. For God, there is no before or after, there is only the eternal present in which the entire temporal sequence is known and held. Point 7. This atemporal framework provides what its proponents see as a coherent explanation for several key divine attributes. It grounds divine immutability, changelessness, as a being outside of time cannot undergo change, which is an inherently temporal process. Point 1. It also supports divine simplicity, the doctrine that God is not composed of parts, as a temporal being could be seen as composed of its successive temporal stages. Point 6. Most critically for the present inquiry, it offers a powerful model for understanding divine omniscience, suggesting that God knows all events not by foreseeing them across a temporal distance, but by seeing them all as present within his eternal consciousness. Point 1. The sempiternal views divine temporality. Contrast to the classical view, the doctrine of divine temporality, or sempiternity, argues that God exists within time. Point 1. According to this model, God is everlasting. He never had a beginning and will never have an end, but he experiences temporal succession just as his creation does. Point 3. He exists at every moment of time, possessing a genuine past, present, and future. Point 1. This perspective is often seen as aligning more closely with the narrative depictions of God in Scripture, which frequently portray a deity who acts, responds, and interacts with humanity within the unfolding drama of history. Point 1. Thinkers like Nicholas Walterstorff and process theologians such as Charles Hartshorne have championed this view, arguing that a temporal God allows for a more dynamic and personal relationship between the Creator and creation. Point 1. Proponents of divine temporality contend that for God to be truly personal and relational, to answer prayer, to respond to human actions, to enter into covenant, he must be temporal. If God performs different actions at different times, he must change in relation to the world, and such change implies temporality. Point 4. A timeless, immutable God, they argue, seems distant and static, unable to engage with the world in the intimate way described in the Bible. This view, however, faces significant challenges. It raises questions about divine immutability, suggesting that God changes, which some see as incompatible with divine perfection. Point 1. Furthermore, it reignites the difficult problem of reconciling divine foreknowledge with human free will. If God is in time and knows the future, his knowledge once again appears to predetermine events, potentially negating freedom. Point 6. Contemporary hybrid models. The profound strengths and weaknesses of both the purely atemporal and purely temporal models have led contemporary philosophers to develop sophisticated hybrid views that attempt to synthesize the best elements of each tradition. One of the most influential is the model proposed by William Lane Craig, who argues that God is timeless sans creation and temporal with creation. Point 4 in this view, prior to the creation of the universe, a logically, not chronologically, prior state, God existed in a changeless, timeless state. With the act of creation, God brought time itself into being and freely entered into it, becoming temporal in order to relate to this temporal creation and to know tense facts, e.g., what is happening now. Point 4 this model powerfully affirms God as the creator of time itself and allows for a genuinely interactive, temporal relationship with the world. However, it faces the formidable philosophical objection of how a being that is essentially simple and immutable can undergo such a fundamental change as transitioning from a timeless to a temporal mode of existence. Point 15. Another significant mediating position is that of relative timelessness, developed by Alan Paget. He suggests that God is temporal, but in his own unique, metaphysical time, or pure duration, which is the